What's up, everybody? Welcome into a long-awaited edition of SSPN. I know me and Ethan have been out for the past 2 weeks. If you guys check out our post tab, we did let you guys know that in the past 2 weeks, Ethan did have a loss within his inner circle. So we had to take some time off for that and focus on things more important. But we've got that all squared away. We're back to the normal recording schedule. We made that post this morning so you guys can turn on notifications to stay updated with the channel if you were wondering what was going on with the uploads or where we were or anything like that. But Ethan, we got some things to talk about that have happened over the past 2 weeks, whether it's the new Spurs coaching additions or Project Marvel. There's a lot of different things that we can dive into today, but we got a piece of breaking news this morning, man. Let me pull this up here from an old friend of ours, Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard signed a $28 million endorsement deal for a no-show job with a fraudulent tree planting company funded by $50 million from Clippers owner Steve Ballmer. This was all reported by Pablo Torre on his show, Pablo Torre Finds Out. You can find that out on YouTube to go see the full context of everything going on with this. And within that report, an inside source said that it was to circumvent the salary cap. So obviously, if that does end up being the case, this is all kind of alleged as of right now. The NBA launched its own independent, investigation into this that will really, result in the real results of potential penalties for this once they're done with it. But still, the Clippers are in hot water, to say the least, Ethan, and this could come with some penalties. But of course, with us being Spurs fans and everything that happened with Uncle Dennis in 2019, all of the, rumored demands that Kawhi had, for what he wanted from the Spurs for a future contract and everything that involved with the 2018 exit with Kawhi. Obviously, this definitely, I don't want to say that it just completely changes my mind on how that whole thing played out. But when something like this is going on behind the scenes, even if this turns into, not as big of a deal as it is in the headlines today, this is something behind the scenes that, Kawhi and his group and the team that he's working with, are involved with that's a little shady, to say the least, as of right now. And, one of the other things, Ethan, before I dish it to you, I feel like you and I personally probably kind of, whenever the whole Kawhi thing happened, we tried to look at it from an objective standpoint. Okay, maybe it wasn't, just, all Uncle Dennis and all Kawhi. Maybe the Spurs could have done some things better. And then you see him go win the championship in Toronto, and maybe that kind of makes you think, maybe that was the case, But now that we're here 5 years later with this information, how does that impact your perspective on the Kawhi exit?
That's a really good question, actually. Probably not much. Not much. I mean, I feel like this kind of thing probably goes down often in the NBA or really in professional sports, if I'm being quite honest. And my immediate reaction when Kawhi did everything in 2018 was obviously very hurt. Personally, even though obviously he didn't do it to Ethan, he did it to the Spurs. But as a fan, I was definitely traumatized by that, and I hated him for a few years. But then I kind of came to what Jude was talking about, where it's like, the Spurs probably did mess up a few things. What Tony Parker did kind of wasn't cool, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know if this adds anything to it, because I already kind of thought that Uncle Dennis and Kawhi were being, you know, not the best partners in terms of what an NBA franchise and their players, try and get out of a contract agreement. So, like, I don't think it adds anything there. But I will say it is very unfortunate for the Unction and Clippers nation to be going through something like this, especially with a guy who already doesn't show up to his real job, Jude, to then have a fake no-show job where he's getting 28 million is not a good sign, especially for that franchise specifically.
And I'm glad you brought up his play there, because that's the other thing. After the whole fiasco that went down in 2018, plays for the most part a full season. I'm sure, I can't remember the exact games that he played in Toronto. Maybe it was in the 60s, but he
I think
played the
like
playoff.
50 something.
Right. Still played most of the season and then played
Mhm.
the whole playoffs. So that's what matters. Like that's a good Kawhi season. So it's like, okay, maybe you can give him the benefit of the doubt. But since he's joined the Clippers, it really just has been kind of like that 2018 season in San
Mhm.
Antonio over and over again. So when I compile another like 5 years of evidence of that continuing to happen, And then you see something like this happen in the headlines. For me today, personally, my reaction was I feel like all of the rumors that were going on in 2018 about Kawhi and his camp and the things that they were doing, I don't think there were as many things that the Spurs could have done better than I thought previously, if
Mm.
that makes sense. So that's the way that it changed for me. It made me just look at it like, okay, maybe all these rumors and stuff that people were reporting and talking about really were true. Like it was as outrageous, you know what I mean, as people were saying. And obviously in the moment, like, you kind of believed it and you thought about it, but I just feel like with this other now 7 years of context, it just really makes me like, and maybe I have too high of a standard to need another 7 years of
Mhm.
like for it to really submit for me. But when I saw that today, it wasn't like I don't think there's a lot worse things going on in the world, to be blunt. Like I don't think
Yeah.
Kawhi is like necessarily a bad person for this or anything like that. But I do think when I saw that, I was just like, man, the Spurs probably did everything they could. You know what I mean? Whenever that whole situation happened in 2018. And regardless of maybe some things that we stood our ground on that led to some contentious conversations, I don't think that, like, I just think that the level that I felt like we could have potentially been at fault with the Kawhi thing is just a lot less after seeing
Mhm.
this story today. That's my reaction to it.
For sure. I actually never thought the front office or I never thought the front office did anything wrong
Yeah.
for the Kawhi situation. I always thought if anybody did something wrong, it was Tony Parker, and maybe Pop, just like pushing him too hard, quote unquote. And that's really giving Kawhi the benefit of the doubt. But I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah, that was pretty much my main takeaway from it. The one other thing that I did want to say on this, a couple episodes ago, Ethan, I believe it was our last live, and I want to say we were talking about Dylan Harper getting number two, and
Yeah.
there were maybe some people who were a little bit like, you need to save that number for Kawhi and stuff like that. And somebody brought up Don Harris during that conversation, longtime reporter for, I believe, NBC. Look, with the train, they love Don Harris.
He's back. Yep.
For NBC. And whatever the comment was in that live, I kind of was like, Don Harris. And, basically I kind of had an insinuation that, some of his opinions I didn't agree with all the time or I disagreed with. And kind of what I was getting at when I said that was a lot of the Kawhi situation. And honestly, I feel like what came out today really vindicated a lot of the stuff that he said. And obviously, there's a lot of, the NBA investigations still got to play out and everything like that. But um, I just wanted to say, I felt like I've kind of been thinking about that since I said that. Like, shout out to him for everything that he's done. He's covered the Spurs like longer than I've been alive, literally. So, much love and respect to him. And he took a victory lap today on Twitter, rightfully so, because he did a lot of that reporting with the Uncle Dennis stuff. And me, I'm like, man, this is making him hate the Spurs even more in the moment. When I'm 18, and now that I'm 25, we've got this other information. I can look back with a different perspective and be like, nah, he was just trying to get all the stuff that was going on behind the scenes really out there. And now we're seeing it happen with another team, 7 years later. So shout
Mm.
out Don Harris. Much respect and love.
Shout out Don Harris. And no disrespect to Kawhi, but of all people to pay an extra 28 million to, Kawhi is probably the last on my list. You know what I mean? Bro's
Dude.
never there. You're not going to win a ring. Like there are plenty of other people that deserve that money.
Well, and that's the thing. Again, it just goes back to all of the demands, in the contract that he wanted for the Spurs. I'm sure this was a part of it with the Clippers. I mean, I know there were other demands aside from this one, but I'm sure they were just trying to do, as much as they could to
Mhm.
benefit Kawhi as much as possible. And, from their perspective, I can't really necessarily blame them on that, but you know, it can get you into some sticky situations like they're in right now.
For sure. Maybe they'll make him take Paul George back as punishment.
Oh my goodness. They'll finally, or I was going to say they'll finally come together, but you're right. Yeah, they already played together on the freaking Clippers. Oh my goodness.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Do you remember the old Spurs rumors with that?
With Kawhi and Paul George.
Hmm.
I do. Yeah. Right before he got traded to OKC, that was the pipe dream. And then right before Kevin Durant went to Golden State, remember he was supposedly choosing between
Yeah.
us and OKC, and then suddenly Golden State came out of left field. Yeah, there were a lot of rumors like that for the Spurs. DeMarcus Cousins or
Yep,
Boogie.
yep.
Oh, if
Oh
only.
man. But whenever it comes to those guys in LA, I'm glad that that happened there and not in San
Yes.
Antonio with
Yes.
the way that it went. But that's pretty much all I got on the Kawhi situation. Ethan, what are your thoughts on that? Or
I
any final thoughts?
No, sir, nothing additional. Shout out Don Harris. I guess that's all we can say.
For real. He was on top of it from the jump and still on top of it today. But we also got some other stuff going on in Spurs world, Ethan. But before we get to our main two topics, there's two little tidbits that I got for you.
Okay.
One, Keldon Johnson back to number 3.
Right on. Shout out my guy.
And then there's this one right here, the Stein line. So Mark Stein reported in his newsletter that he was told that Wemby recently played on a full court run at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, and for the record, he's said to have looked pretty stellar. Now, obviously, there's not a ton that we can take away from this, but the main thing is that these were his first practices after his recovery, and it's an accredited NBA source.
Is it even a headline, Jude? Like, is it even breaking news? Like, obviously, Wemby looked stellar, unbelievable, out of this world. In any moment that he picks up a basketball, is he going to look out of this world? But I'm glad he didn't look. I don't even know if the injury that he recovered from is something that would make him look like
Right.
gimpy, for lack of a better word. So I'm glad he looked solid in his opening run. I'll leave it at that.
We've talked about the Carter Bryant open runs. We've talked
Mhm.
about the Stephon Castle open run. So I had to throw that little tidbit in there. But again, very much a tidbit. And like you said, breaking news, Victor Wembanyama is generational.
Great basketball player. I think the bigger breaking news is Keldon Johnson getting number 3 back.
You're right. Honestly, that probably is.
And now I gotta find a place to put. I've been meaning to hang it up. Maybe the comments can tell me where I should hang it. Maybe there. I have my number 3 signed Keldon jersey that is
Ooh.
officially now more, I guess, real that I can hang. Maybe there, but my door might hit it. I don't know. We'll figure it out. It'll be up soon.
That looks like a good spot, but man, those KJ0 jerseys, those are going to be a collector's
They
item
will
in,
be.
in 2050, man.
For 1 year. For 1 year, he rocked that thing. I kind of liked it.
I did too, man. I did too. But with Chris Paul leaving, there was no point
Might as
for him.
well.
Yeah. But the other big news here that we have today, Ethan, well, I was about to say big news. It's not really big news. The Spurs signed another training camp player, and that is Stanley Amude, who played at Earl Warren in San Antonio. He didn't grow up completely in San Antonio, but did play high school ball in San Antonio. I believe
There you
averaged
go.
17 in the G League and is like a 40% 3-point shooter. Again, that's just another addition to the training camp. Probably not going to be somebody who's on the actual roster. But the Spurs do have, as Paul Garcia says here, I forgot I had this. The team has room to add one more player for the camp and preseason.
Hmm.
And I believe, if I'm understanding the roster correctly, Ethan, we also still do have that open roster spot as well. But
We do.
again, when we talked about that 2 weeks ago, we kind of felt like if we hadn't signed anybody 2 weeks ago, we're going into the season with an open roster spot. So now that we're here 2-3 weeks later, that's probably even more so the case.
Probably so. I would imagine we do continue or start the season with that open spot.
For sure. But with that being said, Ethan, let's go ahead and get into our bigger topics today. So we'll start off with the Spurs coaching staff additions, which include Tim Martin, who is a personal trainer of a couple different NBA players, as well as Victor Wembanyama. And then Rashard Lewis, Ethan, signed as a player development coach. I'm going to dish it to you. What are your thoughts on Rashard being a player development guy for SA?
Dude, I love Rashard Lewis. I am such a big fan of Rashard Lewis. Back in his Orlando Magic days with Dwight Howard, and then of course as our arch rival for the Miami Heat. I'm not young enough to remember when he played for Seattle. I don't remember anybody when they played for Seattle, but I just love his mentality. I've always loved his game. I saw him mostly as a 3-and-D guy, but I know he had more
Mm-hmm.
versatility to his overall game when he was younger. But anytime you can get, I consider him a legend. He's not a Hall of Famer, but a guy with real prestige amongst the NBA players and community to be a part of your organization. in this way, I think it's a huge win for the Spurs and for the team as well. I think it'll go a long way in the locker room.
Yeah, I was really happy to hear when we signed him as a summer league coach, and then
Hmm.
to see that he's going to stay with the team. I'm just super excited to see it long term. Like you said, definitely a player that I grew up with, and I think there's a lot of things in player development specifically
Oh
that he
yeah,
can teach guys skill wise.
Carter Bryant specifically is the guy I immediately thought of.
Ooh,
Jude. Obviously, we want more from Carter than just to be a 3-and-D role player,
right.
but Rashard Lewis is one of the best to ever do it as a 3-and-D role player. So if he can rub off a little bit of wisdom for Carter Bryant, that would be fantastic.
I had not thought of that yet, and I think that is really, like you said, put him in the personal training sessions
Hmm.
with Rashard. Let him go to work and see how it plays out in Austin. And man, in a year, I'll be excited to see where he is. But the other guy that the Spurs hired, Ethan, was Tim Martin. Martin has worked with several NBA players, including Victor Wembanyama, Trey Young, and Tyrese Maxey. And I have another article here. Did it switch? It did not. Okay, here. Let me stop sharing this real quick, and then we'll get this back up here in a second. But this guy has a crazy story, man. Oh, shoot. What the heck just happened?
There we
Okay,
go.
here we go. I'm trying to not get copyrighted here.
Mhm.
Okay, we're turning that off. Okay, so this is an article. Well, I guess this is published. I thought this was yeah. The video published above is from 2022. Okay. I thought this was a 2022 article. Regardless, the Spurs hired Dallas-based trainer Victor Wembanyama, or Dallas-based trainer who went from being homeless to training Victor Wembanyama. Okay. Um, so Tim Martin has been hired as an assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs. There were a flurry of coaching hires, like we talked about beforehand. But Martin, again, like I said, was someone who was homeless before and then ended up working his way just into becoming one of the top basketball trainers in the Dallas area and just overall in basketball. I thought that this article at the top was gonna okay. This is where it is. He met Wemby during COVID. Um, over the phone, and they've been training for like 2 to 3 years is the point that I'm trying to get at here.
Hmm.
And they did it virtually at first, obviously when he was in France, and then eventually he ended up coming to Texas to train with them even before he got drafted by the Spurs. So we talked about the other trainer who's been doing a lot of the tennis ball drills and all that type of stuff that we talked about last
Hmm.
or coming into Wemby's career, him getting signed by the Spurs. Um, and then now we have another trainer who he's also been working with, also getting added to the coaching staff. But he's someone who's worked with Tyrese Maxey and other guys as well, and has a pretty crazy life story, as you guys can see here also. So he attended over 11 schools over 12 years from elementary to high school. He played high school ball in New Mexico and received a Division I offer to Pepperdine, but had to attend junior college due to poor grades.
Hmm.
An ankle injury in junior college put an end to his D1 hopes. And that's when he slept in the back of his car for about 7 months. He took showers at a rec center, shaved in the sink. His car even got repossessed at one point. Um, and he slept on a little brown love seat in an apartment for 2 years. But over time, he grew his bank account and a roster of NBA players to train. He grew his clientele in Dallas with the game's up and comers. Again, that goes to Tyrese Maxey, who's been working with him in high school. Another quote that he has is, "It's crazy because his work ethic is second to none, and I think that's why we get along so well." And I'm sure somebody who's been homeless at some point in their life and had to grind out of it can definitely teach guys work ethic.
Hmm.
But again, sorry for the kind of jumbled start there. I
No,
felt
you're
like
good.
I felt like I remembered the article starting off a little bit more with
Mm-mm.
his relationship with Victor. But regardless, has a long history
Yeah.
of training NBA players and also working with Victor. So I felt like this was a really good addition to the staff.
For sure, dude. And not even from a basketball standpoint, but just from what he's been through in his life. That's somebody you want around a young locker room just to talk to him just about life in very much a pop fashion. I don't know how much involvement he'll have with the broader team or if he'll be more specific to a couple of players. I'm not sure exactly what his title or role will be, but definitely happy to have him part of the organization. And you immediately look at his connection with Wemby, and obviously that's a big reason probably why he was hired by the Spurs. But then Trae Young, Tyrese Maxey,
Yeah.
who did we just draft, Jude? Two
Oh,
guards.
Dylan Harper. And
Dylan
I, I,
Harper.
I was going to say Stephon Castle there because I was thinking about like his ball skill development. And
Well,
anyways,
both of them, both of them.
right.
So now you're three, future franchise players. The pillars are what you hope to be the pillars moving forward. All have a connection to this guy. So I think that's huge. And if we can get performances, they're different players, but like a Tyrese Maxey and Trae Young, that level from at least one of these dudes, then the future is bright in San Antonio.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just one of the rising stars in coaching overall. There's a reason that he's been able to build up the clientele that he has, on top
Hmm.
of the relationship that he's had with Wemby for the length that it's been. Um, Somebody that's very good to have in the Spurs building, to say the
Hmm.
least. But the last thing that we have to talk about today, Ethan, let me see here, making sure everything's good to go. Yes, it is. Oh man, I don't even know where to begin with this one. But we've got Project Marvel, which was the name of this episode, of course. Let me see here. When was the exact date? So this was about 2 weeks ago now at this point, on August 21st. The city council did approve a term sheet for Project Marvel, which, if you guys don't know, which I'm sure all of you do at this point, is the downtown sports and entertainment district that will include the Spurs' new stadium in San Antonio. But the mayor, as of right now, is kind of in opposition to it. There have been some rallies that have been around the city where people have been, holding up signs. They had a whole event where they were basically like rallying, like, hey, we do want this to happen. It was a rally for Project Marvel to go through, and she showed up and basically kind of just
I
like
saw
took
that.
over the whole press conference and everything like that. So there's been a lot of stuff going on with this whenever it comes to San Antonio city politics. So instead of trying to understand it myself, Ethan, I just figured we would go through KSAT and this article that they have that pretty much breaks down everything going on. So again, this was a couple weeks ago. The San Antonio City Council has approved a funding deal for 1.3 billion for the Spurs arena after shooting down the mayor's request to pump the brakes. At a 6-hour meeting on Thursday, packed with business leaders, community groups, Spurs officials, and even Spurs legend Sean Elliott, City Council members voted down Mayor Gina Ortiz Jones's proposal 4-7 without any discussion apart from the mayor's own comments. The group then spent an hour and a half discussing the terms before passing them 7-4 along the same split. Now, there's a lot of different quotes here that they show, who voted for what and who voted against what and everything like that. But let's get down to the terms here. The proposed NBA arena at the site of the former Institute of Texan Cultures building in Hemisphere is a key part of Project Marvel, the city's plan for a wider sports and entertainment district. The funding deal includes the city kicking in up to $489 million for the arena and Bexar County up to another $311 million. This is just crazy money. The Spurs would contribute at least $500 million plus any cost overruns. So the Spurs are saying any cost overruns they're going to pay for. The Spurs would also guarantee $1.4 billion of nearby development over a 12-year period, including offices, retail, housing, and a boutique hotel for visiting teams. The city would front its share of the cost by taking out bonds, which would then pay the debt down using revenue from the Spurs leasing the arena, ground leases under the new development, and special tax capture zones for property tax and hotel-related state taxes. That is just a lot of fun political economic jargon there, Ethan, that I'm sure a lot of people heard me saying are like, I'm not sure exactly what that means. But I think the biggest thing that I would say there, Ethan, is again, any cost overruns the Spurs are willing to pay for. And then on top of that, they're investing in like the entire area, like, and they're paying for the opponent's team hotel as well. But I'm going to skip down here to a little bit more because, I mean, you guys can see Coward because we've got all this beef going on. But I'm going to scroll down to the end. This is like the legit term sheet with all of the details here. So total cost, 1.3 billion. The size of the stadium would be 17,000 to 18.5 thousand. It would open by the 2032-2033 season, which would be about when Victor is either 29 or 30, so right in his prime. at least $500 million plus any cost in excess of the city and county contributions. Um, the city will contribute up to $489 million, or 38% of the arena cost, whichever is less, financed through the Spurs' lease of the arena, ground leases by developers in tax capture zones for local property tax, and hotel-related state taxes. Bear County is going to contribute up to $311 million. The Spurs are going to pay $4 million in rent over a 30-year lease. The city would buy the site of the former Institute of Texan Cultures building from the University of Texas system, which had previously estimated would cost $60 million. The Spurs will still have the ability to play home games at international sites or other neutral sites. So, like Austin, that could still happen, or even potentially the Alamo Dome, they say here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else here at the end that's really super important. Let's see here. The Spurs would pay $2.5 million annually for the total of $75 million throughout the 30-year lease, with funding allocated by the city council. I feel like there were some other community payments or just like organizational things that I saw on Twitter reading about this that the Spurs were also committed to. We've obviously seen like Spurs Give Back and Spurs Give and all that stuff that they've been involved with for years. So I believe there's a financial commitment that they're also putting in for that as well. But what are your thoughts on all of the economic aspect or everything that we just read there, Ethan?
Um, it's weird. I haven't lived in San Antonio in like 3 years now, so I feel a little bit removed from this. But from what I understand, the average taxpayer isn't going to feel an increase in taxes from this. This is mostly paid by hotel and tourist money. Excuse me, my cat wants to say hello. So call me ignorant. Reading this article, I don't see the downside from I live in San Antonio, so this is going to affect me outside of construction. That's the only negative that I can feel from this. Construction and traffic is going to get worse. So
And
I don't,
that's already that
and that's already bad.
that's already too far gone. I can tell you that as someone who goes to San Antonio pretty often, that's you're going to deal with that regardless.
It's already terrible. And you can make the argument that, hey, maybe the city should put this money elsewhere. Fair point. Don't really have an argument for that. But the San Antonio Spurs are taking on the majority of the cost here. And I could really make an argument that the San Antonio Spurs are the most important thing to the city of San Antonio outside of its people. Like that is the only tourist attraction that we have, really. I mean, you could say the Riverwalk, you could say the Alamo. I live there. Both of them are very overrated. Let's be completely honest. It is all about the San Antonio Spurs. The Riverwalk is kind of dirty. There's a lot of homeless people. We want to help them, but that's what it is. It's that is the that is the fact of it. And then the Alamo, you could jump over it with a pogo stick. It's very small. It's under an overpass. They prettied it up, I know. But anyway, what I'm getting at, Jude, is that you have to make the San Antonio Spurs happy. It feels like they're doing a lot to get this deal done on their side of things. Um, and I think inevitably it will only be a positive for the city once it's complete. Um, that's my opinion. That's from somebody that doesn't live there. It's not going to have to deal with the aftermath or the effects of it. But that's just an outsider looking in, and obviously biased because I'm a ginormous Spurs fan. But last note, I'll say the mayor, she could be awesome. I don't know anything about her. She needs a new PR team because how you know she could have been making phenomenal points. I really have no idea because all I saw was like just the worst behavior of like a political person trying to make a point. So she needs to work on that approach. Otherwise, that's all I have to say about that.
There was a city council member after this meeting that
Hmm.
commented and said that would like for her to have more decorum specifically.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
So the other city council members are saying that, Ethan. I don't think you're too crazy on that one. I think the two biggest things, other than all of the details that we just read off to you guys there, is one. How do I put this? Well, here I'll start off with this. Mayor Jones, her big thing from what I've seen is she feels like there's bigger issues that San Antonio needs to address, specifically poverty. And how do I say this? I definitely agree that San Antonio and a lot of urban cities around the country, for that matter,
Hmm.
need to address poverty. And like you want to, the poverty rate. That's why the Spurs does a lot of the things that they do in the community. They do so much for Spurs Give because of the poverty that is in San Antonio. So like, I don't disagree with her logic there at all.
Mm-mm.
Um, but one, this is going to create a ton of jobs potentially for people in that income bracket. Not saying that every single, not saying that the entirety of the jobs that they're going to have, are going to be people who are in poverty, but still, there is going to be a lot of, economic
Economic
jobs,
boost.
right, created from this. Um, and then I think the other thing is I just feel like if you went and asked any San Antonian man, like I feel like if you went and asked a San Antonio who's on the lower side of the income bracket,
Hmm.
who's living paycheck to paycheck, really trying, what I mean, to just make it work in today's world. And it's not necessarily easy for them. I think a lot of those people would be like, no, the Spurs, like the brand new Spurs stadium would be like that would be like that would be exactly what we want. That would be the
Hmm.
community thing that we could go to, for our kids and everything. You know what I'm saying? And obviously it's going to be expensive, but dude, like I have memories of getting nosebleed tickets for
Yep.
like at a cheap, rate and just being in the stadium. I had nosebleed tickets for I can't remember which year this was, but it was the triple overtime game where Damian it was in the like 2015, 2016 or no. Actually, I think it was probably before that, but it was the triple overtime game where Dame went off. I believe LaMarcus was still on the Trailblazers as well.
Mm.
So I think that might have been 2014, actually. But again, there was a triple overtime game when it was prime Dame and LaMarcus, and they actually ended up winning that game in San Antonio. I was in the nosebleeds for that game, and that's one of my favorite memories. You know what I mean, growing up as a kid, and we didn't spend the big bucks. You know what I mean, for the big tickets. But again, I'm getting off on a side tangent there. I just feel like most of the people that she's trying to like advocate for would be for this, first of all. And then two, I just feel like I feel this is you're going to have to address poverty regardless of if you build this stadium or not. And I think also that like and I don't mean that in any way, but it's just the truth. Like
Yeah.
and then on top of that, and maybe this is just me being a completely, biased Spurs fan with Spurs colored glasses on, but the Spurs are like probably the top organization or business in the entire city that does things for the community, like and for those groups of people that she's trying to advocate for. So
Hmm.
that's really my take on it. I feel like this is an obvious we should do this. And that's and another thing, like you mentioned, Ethan, and we didn't really touch on this on the terms that I was mentioning here. The Spurs have been like super hard. Like RC Buford was making statements, Peter J. Holt was making statements like we're not raising taxes. And I think they would even be willing to pay it as well, which is kind
Hmm.
of what we got at earlier. Let me scroll down to it again. Where was it? Anyways, it was the part where they're plus any cost overruns. And I know that's not necessarily taxes, but that indicates to me that they're willing to kind of cover the bases if the city needs it.
1000%. I only have one question, Jude.
Okay.
And it's how big is the new HEB zone going to be?
Will we have an HEB zone?
An HEB section, maybe.
We need HEB Buddy, Spurs the Coyote halftime
Hmm.
crossover.
Ooh, dude. That would feed the poverty. That would feed
That
families.
oh
Can,
my
can
god.
we get HEB's commitment to feed the poverty?
But in all seriousness, like because I don't want to crap on what she's trying to do because I totally
No,
get
yeah, for sure.
what she's trying to address, but like just honestly from an objective standpoint, like yes, this is going to cost a lot of money. I'm not gonna, of course it is. You know what I mean? You're building a new sports and entertainment district, but that is going to have like a very positive economic impact. And I know that economic numbers aren't immediately translating to people being lifted out of poverty. But with how the Spurs operate, Ethan, I feel like a lot of the people that they hire here are gonna be people who are in need for work.
I would agree with that. And last point I have on this, Jude, it's the San Antonio Spurs. Like I know we're fans, but of all the franchises, like I feel like the San Antonio Spurs takes care of the city and the community that they are a part of. You know what I mean? So why
Yeah,
would we be super skeptical? Like a nice layer of skepticism is fine. Like I get it, you're a city official, but
right.
let's be honest about who we're talking about here. This is Sean Elliott.
Yeah, this isn't the Clippers and Steve
Yeah, this isn't
Ballmer.
Steve Ballmer. We don't have a fake brand. Like we actually let him
This is
go
not a
allegedly.
fake plea a tree planting company. We swear.
Honestly,
Oh my goodness, man. Well, that pretty much wraps up all my thoughts on this one, man. I hope that eventually this does get hammered down and passed, because the other thing that I forgot to mention with this, Ethan, as much as this is what's agreed to as of right now, you guys probably saw this here. I'll pull it up one more time for us just to hammer the point home here, Ethan. What's the big headline underneath? Discussion ongoing on the actual terms.
of course.
So this is all just like we needed to talk about this, and this was like the dominant conversation. You know what I
Hmm.
mean, in Spurs world over the past 2 weeks. But this whole fiasco, like we might go through another one and another one after that if they can't agree on this crap. So I just really hope that we can come to a resolution as soon as possible so that Wemby's prime can have this stadium. That's really all I care
Hmm.
about.
I'd like to see a game in the stadium before I die.
Yeah.
That'd be the preference.
That too. And I want to see it in Wemby's prime too.
Yes, I don't want to see like an auto generated 2K player. I want to see Victor Wembanyama.
You're gonna you're gonna see the 2042 Spurs, which is essentially just the 2022 Spurs, but 20 years later.
Right. Have you ever played 2K long enough where you start getting guys like Charles Barkley Jr.
Oh,
and like Wayne Wembanyama, and it's like, what's going on?
I have not. I have not.
I
But
unfortunately have.
I. There you go. There you go. Well, any final thoughts before we depart, Ethan?
No, sir. Go Spurs, go.
We appreciate y'all. Thank you guys for bearing with us for the past 2 weeks. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the channel, check out our post tab, turn on that notification bell, follow us on X or Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all in the next one. We're getting close, Ethan. We're only about a month away from preseason, basically, as of right now. So we'll be getting into position breakdowns and some other on-court stuff as we get closer to having some real on-court reps. So again, thank you guys. We'll catch y'all in the next one. Go Spurs, go.